The moment the police officer snapped the handcuffs around her wrists, everything seemed decided. A crying little girl clung to the woman's apron, screaming as if her world was being ripped apart. A small boy held tightly to her leg, refusing to let go, and behind them stood a billionaire, cold, composed, and certain he had just exposed a thief. But what no one noticed in that moment was the silent witness watching everything. A camera mounted high above the marble entrance. It saw what no one else did, and within hours, that footage wouldn't just free an innocent woman. It would shatter a powerful family, ruin reputations, and expose a truth so ugly that even money couldn't bury it. Backhand index pointing right before we continue. Make sure you like, share, comment, and subscribe to Black Legacy for more powerful stories like this. The mansion stood like a monument to power. Located in one of the most exclusive neighborhoods, its towering pillars, polished marble floors, and perfectly trimmed gardens reflected a life most people could only dream of. This was the home of Richard Halston, a billionaire known for his ruthless business empire and spotless public image. To the outside world, Richard was a symbol of success. He appeared in magazines, donated to charities, and spoke about discipline, hard work, and integrity. But inside the walls of that mansion, things were different. The atmosphere wasn't warm. It wasn't welcoming. It was controlled. Every staff member knew their place. Every movement was watched. Every mistake carried consequences. And among the staff was a woman named Alina. Alina had been working in that house for nearly 4 years. She wasn't just a maid. She was the quiet backbone of the household. She cleaned, cooked, organized, and often cared for children when their parents were too busy. She had come from a difficult background. Life hadn't given her many chances. This job, no matter how demanding, was her stability. But what made her presence different was a bond she formed with the children. Lily, the youngest, adored her. The little girl followed her around like a shadow, trusting her more than anyone else in the house. And Noah, slightly older, found comfort in her presence, something he rarely felt from his own parents. Because Richard Halston and his wife, Victoria, were rarely present emotionally. They were busy maintaining their image, their status, their control. To them, staff were replaceable, invisible, and sometimes suspicious. It started with small things: a misplaced item, a missing accessory, a subtle glance. Over time, Richard began to develop a quiet distrust toward Alina. There was no real evidence, just assumptions. And in a house where power ruled over truth, assumptions were enough. The day everything changed began like any other. The house was quiet. Sunlight streamed through the tall windows. Staff moved silently, performing their duties with precision. But by afternoon, tension filled the air. Victoria had noticed something missing: a diamond bracelet. Not just any bracelet. It was expensive, rare, and deeply tied to her social image. Panic turned quickly into accusation. The house was locked down. Staff were questioned. Eyes turned toward Alina. She stood there, confused, her hands trembling slightly as she tried to process what was happening. She had no idea what they were talking about, but in that moment, her innocence didn't matter, because Richard had already made up his mind. He saw what he expected to see, and what he expected was betrayal. The police were called. The children watched in confusion as officers entered the home. Lily clutched Alina's dress, tears streaming down her face. Noah stood frozen, unable to understand why the one person who cared for them was being treated like a criminal. Alina tried to stay calm, tried to explain, but her voice carried no weight in a room dominated by power and assumption. The officers followed protocol. They searched her belongings. They asked questions. And despite finding nothing, the pressure from Richard was undeniable. He insisted. He pushed. He demanded action. And eventually they complied. The handcuffs clicked. And in that moment, something broke. Not just in Alina, but in the children. Lily's cries echoed to the grand entrance. Noah's small hands tried desperately to hold on, but it didn't matter. Alina was taken away, and Richard stood there, convinced he had done the right thing. But what he didn't know was that the truth had already been recorded. It began with a routine review. One of the security staff, uneasy about how quickly the situation had escalated, decided to check the CCTV footage. At first, nothing seemed unusual. Hours of normal activity, staff moving through hallways, children playing. But then something appeared. A moment, small, easy to miss, but undeniable. The footage showed Victoria herself entering the room earlier that day. She wasn't alone. Her expression wasn't calm. It was tense, agitated. She moved quickly, opening drawers, searching through items. And then she did something unexpected. She took the bracelet. But instead of wearing it, she placed it somewhere else, hidden, deliberately. Moments later, she walked out, composed once again, as if nothing had happened. The room fell silent as the footage replayed. Again and again, there was no misunderstanding, no misinterpretation. It was clear this wasn't theft. This was manipulation. The footage was brought to Richard. At first, he refused to believe it. Denial came quickly. Anger followed. But the evidence didn't change. It couldn't be argued with. And as the reality set in, something far more dangerous began to surface. Because this wasn't just about a bracelet. It was about control, about image, about a family willing to sacrifice someone else to protect their reputation. And now that truth was exposed. The consequences came fast, faster than Richard could control. The police were contacted immediately. Alina was released, but the damage had already been done. Emotionally, psychologically, publicly, because the footage didn't stay private. It leaked, and once it did, everything changed. The same media that once praised Richard Halston now questioned him. Headlines shifted. Public opinion turned. People saw what had really happened. An innocent woman accused. A powerful family abusing their influence. Children caught in the middle. And a truth that couldn't be ignored. Victoria's role in the incident became impossible to hide. Her carefully crafted image shattered overnight. And Richard, the man who built an empire on control, found himself losing it all. Business partners distanced themselves. Investors pulled back. Reputation crumbled. Because in the end, it wasn't just about what happened. It was about what it revealed. The way power had been used. The way assumptions replaced truth. The way a human being was treated as disposable. As for Alina, she didn't return to that house. She chose something different, something better. With support from those who believed in her, she began rebuilding her life. Stronger, wiser, and no longer invisible. The children, however, carried a different kind of impact because they had seen the truth. They had felt it, and it changed how they viewed the world and their own family. The mansion still stood. The wealth still existed. But the illusion was gone. And sometimes that's the most powerful collapse of all. Some people think power protects them. That money can hide truth. That status can silence injustice. But the truth always finds a way. And when it does, it doesn't just expose lies. It destroys everything built on them. If this story moved you, don't forget to like, share, and comment your thoughts. And make sure you subscribe to Black Legacy for more powerful, real-life inspired stories.